Hello, this is a mixed type presentation entitled Creative Media Accessibility. It includes PowerPoint slides with text and also over it a video with my close-up as I speak. My name is Pablo Romero Fresco. I'm a white man about to turn 40. I have dark eyes and dark, curly and somewhat messy hair. I'm a researcher at Universidad de Vigo in Spain and at the research group GALMA. Before I begin, I should perhaps point out that I'm referring here to media accessibility in the widest sense, including linguistic accessibility and therefore audiovisual translation with subtitling and dubbing. The origin of this presentation lies in an issue that I've been encountering lately, which is the fact that when applying the accessible filmmaking model, that is, when working on films where translation and accessibility are integrated into the production process, involving the collaboration between translators and filmmakers, I often find that filmmakers demand creative approaches to media accessibility, and yet I struggle to find, for instance, creative subtitlers. There's a company in the UK that provides this service, a German research group that is working on this, and I always end up resorting to Wendy Fox or Rocío Varela, researchers in creative subtitling, who can provide this service. The same goes for training. Creative approaches to media access or to translation may be mentioned in courses, but there's very little proper training available on this. There's some research on creative subtitling, on creative ID, and even on creative dubbing. But again, it's limited as compared to other topics in this area, and it's research that it exists in little pockets, in a fragmented way, but not particularly consistent with, say, an overall term that can encompass these creative approaches. It's kind of divided by modalities. We have creative audiovisual translation, which has been used recently, but with a different meaning, applying to fake translations with humoristic effects. So it's not exactly what we're referring to here. And quite significantly, actually, the term creative media accessibility doesn't even exist in Google at present, even though it's made up of pretty commonly used words. So for this presentation, I'd like to address three questions. Why has creative media accessibility not been tackled more thoroughly before? What is it, or how can we define it? And how can it be developed from the point of view of practice, research, and training? As for why it doesn't seem to have been tackled more thoroughly until now, we may need to look at how audiovisual translation and media access have evolved over the past years, moving from an expert-led view where, for instance, guidelines were often based on the expertise and experience of seasoned professionals, to what has been called a cognitive turn or a shift towards more empirical studies, often audience reception studies where the users play an important role. This has provided guidelines with a more scientific basis, and perhaps it has made them more democratic as they reflect the view of the majority, or of a statistically significant majority, if you like, which reinforces the idea of quantitative, of universal, and the notion of for all, which we can find in Media for All. Now, this is very much in line with a society and the mediascape that is based on numbers and algorithms that determine what we should be watching, what we should be listening to. In terms of research, this has meant that we have very much focused on this statistically significant majority, but it also means that we have often disregarded what lies in the margins, which in scientific terms are known as the outliers, elements that are considered as different, problematic, incorrect or invalid, and are therefore excluded from the analysis. More about this later. So now this empirical and somewhat quantitative approach has been, as I said, extremely useful and is being extremely useful. It's a positive change from the subjectivity involved in expert-based guidelines. But at the same time, though, it has led to a standardized application of guidelines regardless of the particular nature of every film, as though we were using the same ramp for every building. This may, on the one hand, lead to an unfair consideration of access experts as technicians, and on the other, it may limit the potential creativity involved in the use of media access. It can actually result in situations where, while the original viewers of a film can access the creative vision of the filmmaker, the audience of the accessible versions are provided with a much more standardized, comprehension-based access route. As for what it is, or what is it, what is creative media access, it can be defined tentatively as those practices that do not only attempt to provide access for the users of a film or a play, but also seek to become an artistic contribution in their own right, often enhancing user experience in a creative or imaginative way. Of course, this begs the question about the extent to which creativity is inherently involved in all media access and AVT practices. While this is true, we are referring actually here to practices that go beyond standard guidelines, which are normally focused on comprehension. This creative or alternative approach to media access is more focused on engaging the viewers, engaging different senses, playing to their abilities as opposed to their disabilities. More about this is explained in the video that you can see here on this slide and the chapter shown here as well. Now, the way in which Pete Middleton and James Spinney, award-winning directors of Notes on Blindness, approach accessibility, in my view, sums up this idea of what is creative media access. A practice that transcends, as they say, basic considerations of comprehension and plot to become an extension of the creative approach to the film. So let's have a look now at how this can be developed from the point of view of practice, research, and training. In terms of practice, creative media access can be done in collaboration with the creative team or not. When it's not, and in the particular case of subtitles, we're looking at specific types of what Jorge Diaz-Cintas terms as cyber subtitles, especially perhaps fan subs and fake subs. Here, though, I'm interested in creative practices that do involve collaboration with filmmakers. From what I've seen so far, these practices are often situated in a continuum or spectrum, if you like, that ranges from those that try to be invisible and blend in the style of a film, and those that look to stand out and be visible. So let's go through some examples, mostly of subtitling and audio description. I'm not covering here sign language translation, which, as shown in recent work by, for example, researcher Ana Tamayo, is now often used creatively too. So firstly, Alfonso Zarauza, director of the film Ons, asked our research group Galma if we could provide creative subtitles. My colleague Rocío Varela produced a portfolio including different options for the typographical identity of the film and how the subtitles could contribute to it. This included proposals for type of font for the subtitles, color, background, position, effects. For fonts, the director was given dozens of options, including a classic font like Myriad Pro, a more rigid one like Kansu, and a square one like Titilium. He chose the one that he thought suited the film better. He also had a choice between different types of positions of subtitles, under the characters, at different heights, or displaced at the bottom in line with the mise-en-scene, which was the option that he finally chose, always with a view to blending in with the look and the mise-en-scene of the film. He took his subtitling work, or this subtitling work, as just another post-production process. So he was extremely grateful for the back and forth that we had with him, which went beyond what we would have discussed with him had we followed the standard guidelines. Also on the invisible end of the spectrum is the creative accessibility provided by accessible filmmaker Miguel Ángel Font for his film Time for Blues. He had one of his characters, the bad guy here, who worked behind the counter in a bar, wear a key ring that made noise every time he approached. The idea here was that the blind and partially sighted audience could hear this and could recognize the character, which means that there was no need to add an audio description explaining that he was approaching. Again, this speaks to the engagement-based approach mentioned earlier. It doesn't rely on explanations to help comprehension, but rather on the user's senses or tapping into the user's senses and abilities to engage with the film. More visible is the creative approach adopted by Lucía Doval for the film, or the filmed version of the Beatles musical La Catarsis de Jude, Jude's Catharsis, which provides open subtitles and audio description for everyone.
It's a new day for the working class. The air smells of smoke as it comes out of the factories. People hold their tools, which are also their anchors to line production. They are moved by an apparent energy, but their clothes are monochromatic and monotonous. Their routines feed a growing tension that could explode at any time.
The idea here is that everyone is left a little bit in the dark, and everyone is required to do some work. The subtitle users don't have access to the narration, but they can, because the subtitle only covers what you can see on the slide. It doesn't include any of the narration. But they can make up for this by looking at the visuals, where they will find most of the information they need. The audio description users, they don't get a straight audio description, but rather a narration, so they must interpret the narration to get an idea of what's happening on the screen. But then again, even the hearing and sighted viewers need to do some degree of work to, say, for example, see characters instead of children on stage. So, in a way, the idea is that nobody has a straightforward ramp to access this building, and everyone needs to make a bit of an effort, a leap. A more visible, creative approach, in this case to subtitling, was used in the video produced for the BBC programme Newsnight about Brexit, where the subtitles may be said to play as important a role as the speaker himself here.
So, did Cameron demand a 2/3 majority? Or set a timetable for a second vote after a cooling-off period? Or perhaps give Parliament time to debate the detailed terms, taking expert advice? No, he didn't. Running scared of UKIP, he bypassed Parliament and handed over this massively important decision to a simple majority of ill-informed voters.
And finally, perhaps or at the most visible end of the spectrum, stands the disruptive and legendary filmmaker Godard, who in this film, Film Socialism, provides what he calls auteur Navajo subtitles. So, just as Indians were made to sound as though they spoke in choppy sentences in American films, the subs provided by Godard feature a few kind of key and often disjointed words, which only gives us partial access to the original French dialogue. So, as subtitle users, we are the outsiders, we are the outliers now. So the subtitles may feature sometimes only 3 separate words or 2 words joined as one, in both cases working as a minimalistic summary of what's being said. So for Godard, the Navajo subtitles add yet another dimension to the film, and they show how relative it is to try to assess a film without acknowledging the inevitable changes in perception caused by subtitling. He shows us that filmmakers who embrace the creative power of subtitling can question and turn on its head the idea that subtitles must provide a faithful account of the dialogue, because it doesn't have to be faithful, and it may not even be an account of the dialogue. I mean, I could, for instance, stop talking and stop talking now and still have subtitles at the bottom, as you can see in this video. They could be my thoughts, or they could be a dialogue I'm having or a dialogue I've had with someone else. The same would go for audio description. As we've seen, it's being introduced often in narrations now. But instead of an external voice, could it be delivered, for example, by the characters themselves? And just as literature allows for unreliable narrators, could we have an unreliable audio description, for example?
Pablo stops to take a sip of water, even though I've just told him he's running out of time.
In terms of research, just as the tendency has been to look for common patterns, assess groups, and in the end learn a little bit about many users, it may be time to add a qualitative strand to it that can help us, for instance, to interview people in detail. For example, with ethnographic approaches. This will not be statistically significant, but it will mean that we're treating the participants not as a group, but as individuals, and that we're learning a lot about a few people instead of a little about many people. Amongst these people are the outliers, which with this approach are as important as any other individual. It shouldn't be difficult for us to do this, as in a way the outliers, the excluded from audiovisual media, were the ones who motivated the development of media access in the first place. Interestingly, and as shown by the brilliant research conducted by Kate Dangerfield for her documentary Within Sound and Image, there are still outliers who cannot access audiovisual media and are thus excluded from the for all tag of the media for all phrase. So their experience can be tackled by the qualitative research proposed here. It may also be possible to produce guidelines for creative media access, but these must be open and non-prescriptive, providing filmmakers with different choices depending on how the film should be received by the viewers. As for training, there is very little, but an interesting one that springs to mind is the course on accessible design in digital media, offered by the Faculty of Media and Creative Arts at Humber College in Toronto. Module 6 is devoted to accessibility innovation in media and creative arts. In general, it would be great, I think, if courses on media accessibility included, perhaps towards the end, an element of creative media access. So, to conclude, the cognitive turn in media access has been instrumental in providing a scientific basis for many guidelines, but it has not been particularly conducive to the development of creative approaches. As a result, we are struggling to meet the creative demand that comes from the collaboration involved in accessible filmmaking. Since theoretical and practical work on creative subtitles or description has been fragmented and inconsistent, I propose that we use a name to encompass it all, such as creative media access, or creative audiovisual translation if you like, so that it actually exists. And then we can map and analyze its professional use, provide training, and do research which could be qualitative and can look at those that have been excluded from research before. Creative media access also offers shelter for professionals who feel threatened by the use of artificial intelligence in translation and media access. The creative work required here cannot be done by a machine, at least at this stage. So, just as films are not normally made automatically. So it's hard to see creative media access becoming mainstream, and it doesn't need to be. But just like independent cinema, it does exist, and it needs to be understood and embraced. Just as the director of Parasite, after winning his Oscar, became a strong defender of translated cinema with this now famous quote, we could perhaps adapt it as a call to embrace creative media access. Once we overcome the rigid structure of the guidelines, which are useful, we'll discover the still untapped artistic potential of media accessibility to become an extension of the creative filmmaking process. At the moment, the possibilities are endless, and we seem to be witnessing a little revolution in the area of film by filmmakers who are experimenting with translation and media access, just as older filmmakers experimented with the beginning of silent movies and films with sound. For me, this goes to show that, contrary to what may be believed, we're probably not only dealing with a new approach to media accessibility, but rather a new approach to filmmaking that we can finally be part of. Thank you very much for your attention, and should you have any questions, please feel free to email me at the address shown on this slide. Thank you very much.